John, you are looking live in West Palm Beach, Florida, Air Force One, where President Trump will be within the next half hour, leaving that Sunshine State, getting back to Washington, but not before finally announcing that he has found a replacement for Michael Flynn, who resigned as his national security advisor a week ago today. Army General H.R. McMaster is the man who is slated to replace him. We've got the very latest now to Kristen Fisher in West Palm Beach. Kristen.
Hey, Neil. Well, you know, President Trump came down here with one main goal. Yes, he had these meetings about Obamacare. Yes, he had this big rally in Melbourne. But his main goal was to find a new national security advisor. And now President Trump has done just that. He met with 4 candidates over the weekend at Mar-a-Lago. And now we know that one man has won out, and that man is Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. He is a career Army officer. He graduated from West Point. He served in the Gulf War and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he currently serves as the director of the Army Capabilities Integration Center, and now he is President Trump's next national security advisor.
He's a man of tremendous talent and tremendous experience. I watched and read a lot over the last 2 days. He is highly respected by everybody in the military, and we're very honored to have him.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I'd just like to say what a privilege it is to be able to continue serving our nation. I'm grateful to you for that opportunity, and I look forward to joining the national security team and doing everything I can to advance and protect the interests of the American people.
Now, 2 of the other finalists for National Security Advisor also got job offers today. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, who had been serving as the acting National Security Advisor, he was just offered the job of Chief of Staff of the National Security Council. And then a very familiar face to a lot of Fox viewers, John Bolton, the former ambassador to the UN. He is going to be offered a job in some capacity. We don't know what that is. President Trump didn't say today, but he is also likely going to have a job on the Security Council as well, though we don't know what exactly. Now, President Trump going to be leaving Mar-a-Lago in about an hour, heading back to Washington with his new national security advisor. And once he gets there, the other big thing that we're going to be looking at next week from the Trump administration has to do with immigration. They are putting together right now a new version of his immigration order that was struck down by the courts. That is expected to come sometime likely later in the week, but earlier in the week, perhaps as early as today. The other thing that's happening are these implementation memos, and they have to do with border security and deportation. They were signed by Secretary Kelly on Friday, and they could be finalized as early as today, Neil.
All right, Kristen, thank you very, very much. Kristen Fisher in West Palm Beach, Florida. Well, the president, if it's true, Senator, that key to this, at least in a couple of other cases, was that they have their own team around them, that obviously belies that maybe the president had another thing in mind. We don't know, but what do you make of this choice?
Well, first of all, H.R. McMaster is an intelligent, thoughtful warrior, Neil, who has a lifetime of incredible work, not only serving our country, but representing our country militarily. So it's a great choice. And the fact that the president wants some of his team within that team, listen, he's the president. He can do whatever he wants, and it's up to the others to conform, not the other way around. So I'm excited about the choice. He's somebody who's going to buck the system and question some of the decisions, and I think that's appropriate to have somebody always questioning, sir, why are we doing this, why are we doing that, we could do this better, and that's what he's known for, and that's a good thing.
Do you think this whole Michael Flynn distraction, whatever you want to call it, goes away then? I mean, as you know, there have been a lot of people who have been saying, hey, bring on the real agenda, the tax cuts, the regulatory relief. That's what we want to see. That's what the markets have been on tenterhooks for. They'll close today for President's Day. They've been rising mightily, as you know, Scott, on the belief that that's going to happen. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, the fact that we have General Flynn in there and not in there anymore, I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing to kind of show the administration what can happen if you don't cross the T's and dot the I's. And the fact that you're getting H.R. McMaster in there is even, I think, a better choice, quite frankly. Somebody who's not part of the Trump team per se and can really speak frankly and independently. And we spoke about almost 2 weeks ago, Neil, that the president doesn't have his team in place, still doesn't have his team in place. And until that happens, I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass in terms of moving forward with that agenda. I think it's remarkable what he's actually done with the tools that he's been given. The fact I know for a fact that they're working on Obamacare, obviously repeal, replace, I don't care what word they use, they just got to fix it. And then when it comes to the tax breaks, those are happening. And whether you're going to get a combination approach or you're going to get some pay-fors and some not, it's going to happen, but the president needs a little bit of time to get his team in place to move those issues and agendas forward.
So it might be a delay, but it wouldn't be a stop.
Well, when you say delay, Neil, are we at a month yet? That's not a delay in my book.
No, you raise a good point.
I'm sorry.
I guess the reason why I mentioned it with Scott is that some people pounced on this to say, well, we admire what Republicans are trying to do with repeal and replace Obamacare. We think it's a worthy goal, but a Herculean task, and it might get their eye off the ball or delay on this tax cut stuff. You say what to that?
I say that they need to get work a little longer than leaving at Thursday at 2 o'clock and coming back Monday night, and work through the weekend to get the people's business done, because they were sent down there to do our job. The president's working 24/7 like no one I've ever seen before, and Congress needs to follow. That being said, it hasn't even been a month, has it? I mean, maybe a month and a day or two. Give the guy 2 months and a full team. How about that? And then start criticizing. But I know for a fact, and Neil, you know too, because we speak to Steve Moore regularly, they're working on all these proposals, and to unwind a mess like Obamacare, and I know that the Obamacare better than anybody, to unwind that and screw it up again will even be worse. So they're going to take the time, do it right, and make sure that they can move forward with a plan that deals with catastrophic coverage, covers your kids to 26, deals with the pre-existing cares, eliminates that low work week, allows for all the things that everyone's complaining about that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and everybody know need to be fixed, but they won't fix it. When I was there, Neil, we had hundreds and hundreds of amendments to fix these things. They did nothing. Okay, so they have an opportunity to fix it and put the American people first.
All right. Scott Brown, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Former Massachusetts
Thanks,
Senator.
Neil. Thank you.
Scott Brown. Well, President Trump already is looking at the best Dow performance for the first 30 days in office since way back in 1909 when William Howard Taft was president. So what are we to glean from that? Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business Network.